think just to mention that we have Kanumi people out there working now. There are bus drivers here, good, which is a good thing. Then we also have other people that are working on on other projects, and I think you just came back, right? So we don't have as many people as we have. Of course, Grant is also working, but he said he's going to, him and his wife are going to join us for lunch, so that's a good thing. But today we're going to go through, before we start, of course, Marjorie's here. Thank you for being here. We're going to ask Marjorie to do an opening prayer to put us in a good state of mind before we start. So Marjorie, do you want to do that, please?
Au ko tawe na o kagi se mo tatat no mano te kagi sigak. Ka sawe mi a ko mo ta ka kio ka mamaunto ya. Uma kik se wat son ka wapati ya. Ka kio ka mamaunto ya mi pik sko no mo ta ka wea mam sko ta ma ka kigi we. Mina ya pegi sigau ka kio ka mamaunto ka kio ya ka mamaunto. Ka toska ta kumaya da skinan kaya. Stahi kaya. Kaya. Kan pima ka kau kap mat si maga ka kio no ako magan na ka pige we ta ka kio ya ka miu I chetot e o kendo tamat no mano ska gisaga mina ya ka miu pai ko maya ka kwe piko ta to no ako maganuta ka kaya stahi ka to ska ta kum da skinan kendo tamat no mano ska gisaga kasawe mina kasawe miya kakyo umuta ka mamunto yak. Hi.
Thank you, Marjorie. I think today is going to be a really important day. Maybe we'll go through some of the things that we probably should look at. I know we've been going through this process for over a year. I think it was last October when we had the election here. But this is coming down to the nitty-gritty now. Have a seat there. So today we're going to look at the structure. We get to actually see what we would like to see, but before that's happening, we're going to go sort of do what have we done in the past, where are we at, just so to put that in the front of people's minds. So we're just going to do a quick recap. And I think our last meeting that we talked about is, which we broke out in groups, was what was the principles for our decisions for the 5 government areas that happened. It wasn't just 5. What we end up doing is we had people break out in groups, and then we pulled all that stuff out of everyone, every group, and we came up with the 5 areas that people agreed on that was important for the government of Kelly Lake. First of all, there was the principles, is what will guide our government. We're making sure that our government is moving the community forward and the interest forward in a good way, which will be, there's about 15 things that we ask the community to have. Responsibilities, what is our community is asking and trusting our government. Basically, we're going to say, this is what we want you to do. This is how you're going to report back to us. This is what everyone was very adamant on that. Today, we're going to be talking about our structure. What does our government look like today? I think we landed on a couple of common things that we're not happy with the hierarchy where there's one person making the decisions. We want more people making decisions as we go forward as a community. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking what the other quality is that what qualities do we want our government members to have to take on these responsibilities? So what it is what skill sets do we need these people to have? When we elect our people, they need to have skill sets. If they don't have to, it was pretty adamant that you guys said, we want these people to have knowledge in order to represent us. Not anyone could represent us. So those are the ones that we sort of talk. And then number 5 is how should we select our government? We need to discuss that today because there's a couple of open questions. We'll probably end up having an election, which we'll probably looking at January, February. We're going to be looking at if we have an elders committee, how the elders, they sort of sat down and talked about how they'd like to select. We have youth. We need to talk about how we're going to select those people to make the government overall. So today is a very important day to make sure that we talk about this. So we're just going to talk about what happened last month, which I just talked about, what we did with the five areas and principles and responsibilities. Today is like I said, this is exciting. We get to decide what does our government finally look like? You know, at least a draft of what that looks like. So if you guys have been thinking about this is the time to say this is what we would like it to look like and how it's going to represent us. Next month, we're going to be looking at the selection and looking at the skill sets of what this government's going to look like. We're going to be talking about what do you guys see in the leadership? What do you guys want as a leader and how they should represent the community? We need to sort of chat about that. That'll be next month. And in December, we're hoping to have, we're going to have our annual Christmas party on December 15th. When that happens, we're going to bring back all this stuff and say, this is what the community decided on. And then in the new year, we're going to start looking at the selection process and all the different things that need to happen. And we're hoping January, but we probably need another month to February. But that's the idea that we're looking at. Okay, this is what we've done this is our timeline. So if everyone to think about, this is very important timeline for all of us. But it's coming to an end. Like, well, there's a light, but there's more work that needs to happen, okay? So what I just talked about is our principles. We're going to go through one by one. We talked about respect. For us, we need to respect, I think it's a cornerstone of our culture is respecting the land, respecting one another, respecting people's opinions, because in order for us to move forward, it's all right to have different opinions. It's all right to have those different discussions, but the people of Kelly Lake need to respect their government, and then vice versa, that the government needs to respect the people. So respect is a very key part in this. The other one that we identified was transparency. People want to know what's going on. I think everyone talked about the financial and budgets, which is important, but there's other transparency things that we need to talk about. Decisions. If the government makes a decision, they're going to have to come back and tell you, the leadership, why did they make that decision? You need to know why those decisions, and they need to back up those decisions. So if they decide to go in a direction, they're representing you, they need to be transparent why they're doing that. No more just sort of finding out after. So there's a transparency that needs to happen within the government. And of course, unity. And I think it sort of talks about the respect is that we're way stronger when we're one group, because currently where we struggle is that we have disunity within the community. It's all right to, like I mentioned, is to have different opinions. I think it's healthy to have that, it's all right if Loretta and I have different opinions. I still need to respect her opinion and respect ours. And how do we resolve those differences? We can't just sort of say, oh, Loretta's crazy, we're just going to do those things. We need to have those open discussions. So for this, we got to be united and have different opinions, and we need to respect those things. And whatever comes out, we need to respect the community's decisions on these things. So of course, and then of course, the big thing is our government should be protecting our culture and our connections to the land. Without our culture and connections to the land, we'll lose who we are. We don't have our language. We don't have, if we can't practice our traditions on the land, if we cannot speak and interact with one another as we did in the past, we'll end up cease as a people. So we need to protect that. We need to have it in government. We need to have programs to make sure that, teaching our youth to do that. I think we're going to be looking at with Barb doing Cree classes, but there's a bunch of stuff that we need to do to keep our culture alive. But that's part of the things that making sure that this is what the people mentioned, that these are the 4 main items that we need to move forward on this stuff. So the responsibilities for our interim government. So what's going on is that if you look at the spectrum of things, our government that we're going to be selecting in the new year is going to be responsible for certain items, basically getting up the government up and running, developing administration, working out, getting federally, provincially recognized, working with other First Nations. But this is one of the things that we're going to be looking at is pursuing formal recognition. So not only that the government is hard to recognize Kelly Lake because there's so many different, or disunity, we need to say that the Kelly Lake people are decided this is the direction, this is what's going to happen, and we have to make that formal connection with the federal, provincial, and other neighboring communities like Horse Lake, Soto, all the other different ones. So as we move forward, we need to act like a government, do things that would need to be done, like community development. What does that mean? We're going to make sure that there's housing, infrastructure, so we could, because when was the last time we built a house here? 45 years. And we need housing. There's no ands, ifs, or buts. How do we do that? That's a community plan. Infrastructure and services. We need to develop our constitution. Why we need a constitution? So we know the rules for today, tomorrow, and in the future. So if we say we're going to have an election every 4 years and this is the responsibilities, we need to write that down so no one could change those things as we go forward. Policies, of course, is to say who's going to be hired, all those different things in our laws. But we need to start writing our laws down that are pertain to us. So there's a bunch of stuff that needs to happen. It just doesn't happen right away. You have to sort of, it's like building a house. You have to do the foundation, start putting up the walls, and then start adding to it. This is the part where we're actually putting the walls on the house, okay? So protecting the community's land, because what's going on is what you taught when we meet here is that you've seen the work that's happening in the backyard. You've seen the areas that are the trap lines that are being affected. You can't do trapping. You've seen the amount of logs being cut, and, you know, basically it's becoming a sea of stumps out there. We need to start looking at how do we start protecting our land and being recognized by, not formally recognized by the province, but also by industry. Currently, we get federally recognized, but there's a provincial recognition that needs to happen, and that's the part of the government that needs to push that. So, and of course, we talked about supporting and teaching our cultures, language, and everyone needs to be involved in this. Elders, youth, how do we keep maintaining with, and I think Marjorie sort of mentioned that if we don't use the language, where's Barb, it dies. So we don't have the language. Any anthropologists say is key to culture is language. We do not maintain our language, because I know my son doesn't know those. I don't know if you guys are Cree speakers, but we need to start giving them the opportunity if they want to learn, so they could learn. So we need to look at those things, and of course all the other different cultural things that we do out on the land and what we do internally. So currently we have like Kelly Lake Days. We always visited and laugh. That's a part of our culture. We do the turkey shoot. We come together and we visit and laugh. We're having a Christmas dinner because in the old days we all visited it and had Christmas dinner with everyone. We need to bring those traditions back. So those are some of the things that we need to talk about. So today's structure topics I was mentioning is, it's really important. What does the structure we need to move Kelly Lake forward? And you guys need to think about what does that look like. I think we sort of have some ideas that are coming up. We need to discuss those. Did we get them right or did we get them wrong? So we're going to break up in groups again to get everyone's, because it's easier when there's a smaller group to talk, and because it's hard to do this in a bigger group. But we're going to look at how do we come up with a structure. That's all we're talking about today, is how do we come up with a structure that will suit our government. So we look at the old structure that everyone's used to. There's a chief, there's council members, and then we looked at, if you look at what's happening in other communities, more likely you just have the chief making decisions on behalf of the community. I think it was pretty well stated right across the board, everyone. Those doesn't work for Kelly Lake. We can't have one person deciding on who, what, how we do things. We need to look at, so that's the old structure, and everyone's used to this structure, you know, because we look at Horse Lake, Soto, all of them, they all have this structure. This is an Indian Act structure. So when people say, should we have a chief and council? We need to think about, does that meet our needs, okay? So that's one structure. The other structure that we looked at as we look back in the traditionally how we govern ourselves, and this is how we basically govern ourselves: is that we had multiple leaders, multiple decision points, and everyone had input into it. So what we're looking at, this suggestion is, we'll have a government council that will be selected. What we need to decide who and what we're going to call them. We have the elders council that meets regularly, but they're going to start becoming. They're going to have the ability to have input on all these decisions. So we're going to have to revamp that. What does that look like? Is it every elder? Is it 60 and over? But we need to start putting this on paper. Then we have the youth council. So what are we looking at? Age 30? Do we include every single youth, the ones that want to be involved? But we need to start looking and putting what we consider youth, elders, and the government structure. So this is how we best guessed was how we did things in the past. Will it work today? Well, we're going to have to put it in practice if we decide to go down this path. So next. So it's less hierarchy and it's flat. Are we done? So is there any questions around this stuff that people have? I don't know if was that slow enough? Go ahead. Yep.
And now they're coming in.
Yep.
They're gonna wipe it out completely. But they got nowhere else to go. And you know what the saddest thing is? You know where our law, the ball players are going? Going to High Prairie, not even going to BC. Going to Alberta. Now they're gonna come and kill our country. What? Because we got no say. Who are you choice?
Yep.
They're gonna kill that. They're not you can't walk over.
Well, I tell you, if we had our act together, we would have been able to basically have the input into that, Brian. Currently, we don't have our act together. We don't have our act together because we're not unified, and nor do we cannot pursue Section 35 rights. Section 35 rights basically says you can't just come cut logs all you want. You're going to have to get engaged with us because there are certain things we're doing that. In order for our government to do that, we need to give them authority to start negotiating on that behalf. That's very important. If we don't do that, there's going to be, like you said, they're going to cut and no one's going to be there to say stop. So we have to make a decision. Are we happy with that? Or are we going to try to set up a process to deal with that process of what they're doing? Because everyone else in here, we don't like the cutting that's going on. The country that we grew up with is gone. I don't recognize what we currently look at, how we grew up. It isn't what it was when we were growing up and how our people live off this. There's too much logging, there's too much of oil and gas, but we need to have a government to address those issues. And you're right, what else do we do? You have a suggestion? We're all open for those.
Those guys completely stop. They can't even no more at all. Can't. They just done. And they're just coming in because they can. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead. Yeah. It's not we, it was actually everyone's input into this. So yeah, that was all of us that sort of got this. Yeah, it's correct. This is Ramona's idea. We'll put it up there that it was her idea. Yes. So now, yeah, now we need to sort of break out in groups and flush this out more. If this is the area that people like, we need to start saying this is the structure and how do we start flushing it out more. And we talked about those, what we see in government, transparency, all those qualities. We need to start putting that stuff on this structure. Because I think everyone could agree is that not one person should be deciding on behalf of the community. We need more people involved in that, because if we don't have that, it'll just like I said, we'll just go back to where we're at today. So this is very important to do this. So today we get to have an input in this. Randy or Razzle. Yes, that's you're totally right. Yes. Any other final comments? So, of course, this is what we always do. The last 4 months, we've been sort of breaking out in groups and numbering. So get your guess, your number one, okay? Then, so, yeah, but yeah, let's go with 4. So we'll go with 4. So 1, 2, 3. Rodney, you're 4. You're number 1 there, Victoria, and you're 2, Ramona. So you 2 are number 3. Okay, you guys come as a pair. So you're number 4. 1. You guys, you and Loretta want to be a pair or split up? All right, you guys are 2, 3, 4. You're number 1, 2, and 3. Okay, because Brenda, you didn't speak up. Oh, you did? Yeah, seriously, yeah, 4. All right. All right, you guys, so can we have 1, 2, 3, 4? And then we will talk about our structure. And if we like it, then we'll come back and report what everyone else said, like we have done before in the past, okay? Lunch is almost ready, but what we like to do is report back from each of the groups. Once we report back from each of the groups, we'll take lunch. After lunch, we'll sit down as a group, everyone, to trying to add, was there something that sort of triggered a memory, or just to make sure that we got everyone's opinion. So we're going to go to number 1. All right. If not, you could use this one.
Hello? Okay. No, baby. Okay, so in my group, we talked about, we got lots for elders and lots for government, but we couldn't really come up with lots of the youth. Dad, be quiet.
No, who said that? No, that's all right.
Anyway, so we came up with, we have lots for the elders and lots for the government council, but not too much for the youth, just as it's hard to get, we figure, youth involved. So what we said, our elders are limited. An elder should be a wisdom holder, not just because they are 60 over. Elders should be drug and alcohol free, male or female, no age restriction. Decisions need to be unanimous. Elders need to teach, pass along knowledge to the youth. And then for the youth council, we were kind of debating like 10 to 25 to 15 to 35, but we came up with 16 to 30 and must be in school / educated, and that everyone is equal, meaning there's not like a head boss. Like decisions are for the youth, like they make decisions together. There's not just one person who says so. And then for the government, no chief, no council, every 4 years an election, subject to impeachment, meaning if they're not doing right by our community has the say so to de-elect them. And then if something were to happen to the leaders, such as like a death or sickness or whatever, we have a meeting to replace the leader. Government council should have a spokesperson, Government council should have a spokesperson instead of, let's say, like a leader, like one person. That's what we were kind of trying to stay away from in our group. So a spokesperson of each council, 2 youth, 2 government, and 2 elders. And that's it.
Thank you. My group, actually, we broke up to the same as the last group. We started with the Elders Council. I think we talked about what the Elder Council represents. And basically what we said is that the Elders Council brings wisdom. And we talked about years experience and knowledge that equals wisdom. The Elders Council also has criteria for themselves. They basically said 60 plus, because currently I think we have 12 elders in our Elders Council that meets once a week, and they sort of get involved in everything. So they need to have, so what we see them as leading in our traditional and language. They will have oversight on leaders to act accordingly. That basically what they talked about, impeachment. We're thinking that the elders should have a role in that, deciding if leadership is not acting in the best interest of the community, that on community decisions, that they have the ability to basically start a process of telling them to smarten up or impeaching them. More elder involvement. They are spiritual advisors, connection to the spirituality. And I'll keep reiterating this is because it's important, is that our forefathers, my dad, my grandpa, everyone's, when they're out on the land, every single person has a supernatural experience out there. That's a spiritual side that we're connected to. So we need to respect that. But that's basically what we wanted to make sure that's reiterated. They also talked about membership. If we decide a membership down the road, that the elders need to have a say in it. And that was one of the main things that we just talked about. Youth Council, they need to bring their needs, because the youth today is different from our youth when we were growing up. So they need to bring those interests to the community. They need to also, they need to learn the processes like the succession planning. So these are our future leaders, to make sure that they understand everything so they could take over seamlessly, type of thing. The other one is that the youth can attend elders meetings to learn. So it's really a learning opportunity why they're a part of all of this. We need to look at, and then the youth need to get together to start setting out rules and responsibility for themselves. And then they'll also have a membership input. The other one is that that was brought up, which we didn't do, is I think Ramona called it onboarding, but it's basically training our youth and our leadership to have certain qualities so they could represent us. And we didn't want to put training for elders, so because they're old dogs, so we don't do those things, right? So the next one is we're looking at the next one is government council. We can't, yeah. So what they're saying, some of the things that came out is shouldn't be one from all one family. All families should be represented. There should be an election for this government council, so nominations and vote. They'll also have input into membership. Certain qualities needed for a council. These are the training. This is the stuff that we're talking about, is what qualities and skills that we want our leadership to have. They should have a number of odd or even number. We probably went with odd, the amount of council members. Qualifications, of course, there'll be a criminal record check. They should have, the whole council should be equal. Basically, that a chief isn't higher of leader. It basically everyone's equal. There's no hierarchy in this. It's a flat one. The government council will have the oversight of the administration. And then, of course, if there's some qualities that they don't have, they need to have some of that training. And other communities, when the council gets elected, they do a week training on responsibilities, budgets, and all that stuff. We probably need to look at that. We're going to have to train whoever comes in just to give them more tools to succeed on our behalf. And that's basically everything that we have.
Hello. Okay, I had group 3 here, and yeah, we started off with our youth council, which we said would be an advisory council to the government structure. We were debating on the age of 16, 30, or 18 to 59 because they wanted to know what happens to the age gap between if we went like 16, 30. What happens to the 31 to 59? Because we don't fit under the 60 plus. And I say we because I'm 48. So so we're just like we need to discuss what happens to that age group that doesn't fall into youth or elder. We kind of didn't touch like what the requirements are, but we were just trying to suggestions for the age group worth, and they would be an advisory council. And then we kind of said that elder council has been established, so they would be an advisory council, 60 plus, but they also have the power to vote out government council not acting in the best interest of the community. Then we moved on to our government council structure. We said odd number. We said 5 positions, and that they like the governance style model, like how we did that, the one government, one knowledge keeper, one elder, 60 plus, one community, and then one youth. Even though we have a younger age than 18, they would have to be the age of majority to hold that position in the government council. And then we said, just put your name forward, no nominations. And then they did have the question, like our membership, how do we establish that? Like, where do we draw the line of who is going to be our membership? I guess, and that's it.
Okay, so my group kind of basically had the same thing as the other 3. So they liked the idea of the leadership council. They didn't really want to go the chief and council route. They did bring up having people who are knowledgeable about the history of Kelly Lake to sit on these councils, whether that's the youth, the leadership, the elders, or the government council. So for the elders, we did have the discussion of like 60 plus, just because there have been a lot more of the elderly passing over these last couple of years. That those numbers are kind of shrinking. So if we kind of bring it down, that gives them more of a chance to sit on these councils. For the youth, again, 16 to 30 is what they talked about for the age range for the youth. We talked about having elected government council representatives. So again, following under having elected members as opposed to nominated or self-appointed. So to be qualified to represent, they have like good quality speakers with understanding of what the work that they're doing here, as well as the work that they're bringing to industry and other organizations, governments, stuff like that. Following along with also having that knowledge of both government and industry. So again, members are to be voted into the leadership. Another maybe addition that was brought up is to the leadership council is having a women's council, because within our culture, we were very matriarchal. So kind of going back to where women made the decisions. And having the elected members that live in close proximity to the community. If they're not able to live here, maybe within a 50 to 100 kilometer range, they're not living out in Edmonton, Calgary, where they're not able to correctly perform their duties here. So again, an odd number. So looking at possibly having 3 elders, 3 youth sitting on a leadership council along with the government council. Another thing they talked about was positions holding a 4-year term with, after those 4 years are up, sitting out for the 1 year in between unless they are acclaimed, was another option. And yeah, that's it.
So hopefully you guys think about that over lunch, and then whatever you guys think we missed, we'll add to what the 4 groups have done. So lunch is ready. So maybe the elders we'll give them a head start, 5-minute head start, if you guys want to start making your way to getting lunch, and then everyone else could sort of follow behind them. Okay, so the elders, if you guys want to start making your way over there. before Angel runs away, I wanted to acknowledge, stop Angel. I wanted to acknowledge, we reached out to Angel because we recognize her talent. What we asked to do was to do some of our artwork. We wanted to show her artwork on some thank you cards. This is what she came up with, just to let everyone know how good of a artist she is, which we're sort of proud of her. And I know she's nervous, so well done. Okay, let's have a clap for her. Thank you. She's also going to do one for a Christmas card for us also. She's going to work on that. So thank you, Angel. Just to quickly to go through what we went through, in my talking to some of the people, two things came up. One was a women's council. Traditionally, we were matriarchal, and basically women had a bigger role in the traditional ways. So we need to start thinking about how do we actually start putting that in our decision making process. So that was brought up. The other one that was brought up is some people think that maybe 4 years is not enough because we need to think about how many years should the council be elected, because there's a fear that a new set of council will send it in a different direction. These are just suggestions that are coming up, but those are the two that were brought up to me. Is there any other ones that we wanted to chat about quickly that people are comfortable to share with us, to add? So remember, a women's council, how do we actually start putting that into the system? Because we already have 3 councils. Do we start putting 4, or do we talk about a different way of making sure that they're connected? Because I know our elders councils, the bulk of them are women, but we need to talk about how do we specifically address the yeah, that, all right. Go ahead. I think the issue is how do we integrate them into the decision making too? We could go that route, but think about how other routes that we could do. We could do like a Senate, but if there's a couple of ways of doing this, but we probably need to start thinking about how do we involve the women, because we were matriarchal back in the old days. So we need to talk about, if we're going to be going that traditional route, how do we include that? Okay, decision making, is it a different one? Because like I said, currently there's our elders, is that the bulk of them are women, but we need to look at maybe specifically for women. But it just it was brought up, and which is a valid point for us to start thinking about. Okay, Barb, did you want to talk about that, around that, or are we good? You old dog? No.
You have to say about the Native Society, because prior to colonization, we did have a Native Society where we actually made the final decisions. The other groups, like, say, as an example, the hunting groups decided who's going to be their head hunter back in the days. And then they'd take this decision to the women, and the women would say, well, no, he's not really a feasible choice, or yes, he's a fantastic choice. So that's how, and looking at Brian laughing at me, yes, Brian, since colonization, the men have taken over. The patriarchal society came into play when the colonizers arrived. However, we as an Indigenous people prior to colonization were definitely matriarchal, and the final decisions were made by the women. And that's why I agreed with the Women's Council, because we could also have the choice to be like the Senate, like Norman said, where we can make the final decision. So the Government Council comes up with a particular decision, say with logging in the community, in the vicinity, and then they'd bring that decision they made to the Women's Council, and then it would be discussed among the women to see if that's a viable decision to be made.
So we'll put that, and we'll probably need to say how do we incorporate it. But it's a good add-on, because when you look at all the other research, it supports what Barb is talking about. So does it work for us? If it does work for us, how does it work for us? Okay, we need to think about that. Of course, there's the terms of the election. We should talk about how long should the government council should be. So think about that, because I think people talk about 2, 4, and years. Is that long enough? Short enough? We need to think about that. Any other comments that we missed? Is there anything else that you want to do, Daisy? No. All right. Yeah. No. Yeah. 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 So Daisy just remind me a couple of things. Is that remember what we're doing here, because it's flat. But the issue of the youth council came up, and currently we have the bulk of the people that live in Kelly Lake are older, and we probably need to look at how do we extend that youth one. And I think some of the youth that we currently have, we're looking at 30. But as the community starts growing and start adding housing, we're going to start having more youth. But what do we do in the meantime? We need to do to bridge that gap because once we start having housing and infrastructure, we'll start having families coming back and those types. We do have families, but we need to look at the amount of youth that we have and the gap between the 16 and 30. I think that is a common thing over here. We didn't talk about it, us, and over here too. So that's the reason behind the 16 to 30. And as we become a larger community, there'll be we'll probably start lowering it. But I'd rather have those problems, and then at least we have people to choose from, a big group. So as we go forward, we probably start think about maybe as we move. This thing isn't static, where once we decide here that's going to be there forever. We're going to be testing it. Does it work? If it does, we'll go with it. If it doesn't, then how do we adjust to make sure that it works for us? So this is the best theoretical that we're looking at. When we put it in practice and say, does it work for us? We'll come back together and say, maybe it doesn't work for us. Maybe it does work for us. But think about it that way, because this is a theoretical one. Once we put it in practice, will tell us a different thing, like test driving it, right? We got to test drive it. If it works, then we'll move forward with it. But people will have input when we're doing that. So think about the Women's Council, how they're involved, why we have the 16 to 30, and why do we have the flat organizations and involving basically everyone making the decision making, getting away from one person and making all our decisions on our behalf. Okay, so Tanya, go ahead. Well, if you really think about it, it's usually the governance structure that's where the 31 to 59 goes. Because yeah, no, but when you think about it, currently that's the age group that they're in. You know what I mean? Because usually when we elect the government, it's usually that age group, because the elders have a place, the youth have a place. It's the government structure that has it.
I just wanted to add a little something in thinking about this. My understanding, listening to the community about including youth and elders, was about also like mentoring youth into leadership by ensuring that youth have a connection point to the way that the government is operating and that governance is working. And including the elders is to make sure there's really important input and oversight to what's going on. So it's to sort of support learning and mentorship of youth into becoming leaders for the community. So bringing them into that middle age area where they will be actively, of course, in government, in the administration, doing the work on behalf of the community. So ensuring that they're part of that and helping to lead decisions moving forward. And the role of the elders is to make sure that there's always that voice of experience and wisdom that's involved in what's happening. And then I think what I'm hearing too is the desire to move to that traditional oversight piece where women in the community, they weren't the ones who made all the decisions. I don't think that's maybe what Barb was explaining. It was more that, again, it was an extra layer of oversight, right? So if the government made a decision, it's the government that's making decisions on, with the community, and then the matriarchal group or the women's group would just sort of like double check and make sure that it made sense for the community, thinking about the best interests of everyone. So it's not as if anyone's like taking control. It's just ensuring there's a lot of checks and balances at every opportunity through the way that the government is working, and then a lot of input. So it's trying to reconnect with those traditional ways of making sure youth voices were there and being mentored in, elder guidance and wisdom is connected, and then there's that general sort of second layer of oversight as well that the matriarchs would offer, which is, okay, yeah, that sounds good. It sounds like you've had good community discussion. You've considered the best interests of everyone. So yes, that decision is good. Or it could be, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Maybe think about those things and make sure the decision is the right one.
I think the other one that we need to talk about is that I don't think we could do this for everything. Then we just get bogged down in deciding on the colors of pens that we use. But we should look at really big items, like what is the threshold? An example, let's say we make an agreement with the government on a certain amount of money. That probably needs to have everyone's input in that, right? Because that's a big thing. But if it's deciding on some type of stationery within the office, I don't think we need everyone involved in those discussions, right? So we need to decide what is that threshold. If it affects everyone, maybe everyone has to have input, but we need to look at what do those triggers look like at the end of the day. But it shouldn't be on everything because, like I said, there's some day-to-day stuff that need to happen, but at least there's some parameters. So think about that too as we go forward. Is we can't decide on everything, but we need to know what areas that would be decided on, okay? So I think that's about it. I think our next meeting is November. No, I think it's is it? Yeah, we're just going to let you know. So our next meeting is in November. I think it is the 15th. The 17th, we'll be in here. We'll be putting all this stuff together. We'll be talking about it, and then we're going to be talking about selection process and those items that I talked about next meeting, okay? So unless anyone else has any final questions or final answers. Randy, go ahead. All right. Even the Elders Council too? Oh. No. Yep. All right. All right. All right. We have a couple of announcements to make. We have a Halloween party here on the 27th, Sunday. Bring all your youth or Loretta, bring Kevin. So, bring all the youth and let you get candy and all this stuff that happens. So this is a party for Kelly Lake. And instead of us in the old days where we had to walk around, get candy, it'll be here in one place. Okay. So bring all families, it's on the 27th from 1 to 4. It will be decorated. Tanya won a bunch of decorations. It's going to look like a haunted house in here, but it will be able to see. It'll be something pretty good. The other one that we wanted to mention is on the 29th, we're having a ceremony with Kinuma because we have a partnership. The CEO and all of them will be here, and and Marjorie will be leading on the ceremony. It'll be at noon in the center here to basically celebrate our partnership. Right after that ceremony, about 1 o'clock, 1:30, we'll have a big dinner just to sort of mingle. If you guys have questions, the CEO is a really nice guy. If you have questions, come and ask him because he loves He loves this type of stuff. He loves talking to people. He loves to do those things. So that's happening on the 29th. Please come out and come and see what's that about. And then if you have questions around it, because this is a long-term relationship that we're going to have. In the old days, what we talked about, we lived off trapping. That was our economy. We have to do a new economy, and that's part of what we have to do, especially in order to survive. Okay, so the 29th here at the center, we'll be doing that with Kanuma. All right. So with that all, unless Marcus and Dacia, we're all good. So we're done.